Hey everybody, welcome to the Prom Gown Sew Along. Though let me just show you the inside of the silk, and you can see that I clipped all in the curves, so when I pressed it, it would lay flat and it would look nice both right side and wrong. Okay, so and when I pressed it, I used my ham, so it's really important not to flatten these things out. So what you want to do is you want to find the area on your ham that agrees with the curve of the princess seam like this, and then just carefully press that open without squashing it after you've trimmed these. And see, then when you look at it from the right side, see how nice that is? It makes a nice smooth seam. So that's how I sewed these with the 1 inch seam allowance and then clipped the curved bust area. All right, so that's the silk. Let me just show you the strapless foundation now that I have all of the boning sewed on. So you can see in here, I sewed the center front over the princess seam, and then diagonally on the side front piece, on the side seam, and then 2 of the more rigid bones in the back. And when I tried this on, Abby, it really fit super nice. So here, I'm just going to put up a picture so you can see how the boning looked. See how nice, and the shape of it is much nicer. If you're working on a strapless foundation and you're fitting it before you put the bones in, you'll really be surprised how much more shape the bodice has after you put the bones in. So it fits very nicely. And let me just show you the right side of this. All right, so see, I've got the bones in, and you can see all the channels that I sewed for the casing. Okay, so now this is all ready. I want to just make a quick correction. I was calling this lining. This really isn't the lining, because obviously if the smooth part is against you like this, then inside the bones are there, so you also need an additional lining. So I've cut and sewed together another piece of the strapless foundation pattern pieces, and this will actually be the lining inside. So when you look inside the dress, that will be, the boning will be covered. So I just wanted to clarify that this really isn't the lining. I used lining fabric that I interfaced to make the strapless foundation, but you need a separate lining to finish the edges in the end and hide the boning. So that's my little update on the boning in the strapless foundation. I'm working with this really pretty beaded metallic gold lace that is stitched onto nylon tulle. I want to just show you how to cut out the pieces. And you want to make sure that your pieces have larger seam allowances, so there's room for beads that might fall off when you cut the edge. And that way you don't have to worry about caring for the exact edge as much as you would if you're using a small, like 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I used 1 inch seam allowances around the side, on the side seams for these pieces. And I'm running into a little bit of a challenge because you can see that this lace has these medallions periodically spaced along the sort of wispy pearls and gold stitching, and I don't want these to be in what I cut out. So the last piece I have to cut out is the back bodice piece, and I do not want to hit these, because I may use these as sort of a lace applique someplace else. I can't just place it like this because I need an extra inch along the bottom. I extended all the pattern pieces an inch, and I didn't actually put it on the bottom of this pattern piece. So if I allow myself an inch here, I then start to run into the bottom of this. So the way I'm going to fix that is I'm going to just reduce my seam allowances on both sides by 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to fold them back a quarter. And that way I'll have a 3/4 inch seam allowance, but I think then it will allow me to fit this pattern piece in. All right, so now you can see that I have enough room to leave the inch that I need here, plus not hit any of these medallions. And I'm using the grid on my cutting mat to sort of line myself up with that inch that I need. So I'm going to use this edge that's already cut down here. And I'm just going to position the pattern piece on, like so. And I'm using a rotary cutter that's already has a catch in it because I know I'm going to kill this blade because I'm cutting through beads and stuff. So I'm using a rotary cutter that's not like pristine condition because I know I'm going to kill it now. And I'm just going to cut along the side. And I might need to go twice over some of these areas just to get it to separate. Then I'm going to cut across the top. All right, now I'm going to cut up the center back. All right, so now that I have one piece cut out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that piece to match the position of the lace on the other piece because I want it to be symmetrical side to side. And I'm going to line that up by putting it right sides together. And I can see through this, so it's really easy for me to get this to match up. All right, so you can see that I'm matching up the lace by lining the swirls of embroidery right on top of each other. So you can see through here, it lines up pretty well. And I'm just going to put some weights to hold it neatly on top of each other. All right, I'm just going to carefully follow the edge of the first piece of tulle that I cut out. In this corner, I want to be really, really careful. So I'm just going to use my scissors so I don't slip and cut into that medallion in case I want to use it. So I'm going to cut right up next to it like that. All right, so let me show you what I end up with now. All right, so you can see my center back is going to be right there, and it's pretty symmetrical. Okay, so this is my center back. And I've got these designs here. So this is fairly symmetrical. Now, the next step is I'm going to hand stitch through the side edges and the center back edges the seam allowance. And that will allow me to join them together even though I have a smaller seam allowance on the back side seam, because remember I made it 3/4 inch. So it's going to allow me to match it up to the side front, because here's, I just want to show you my side front. Okay, you can see that I've stitched in with this purple. That's my seam allowance. I'm going to stitch the 3/4 inch seam allowance along this side piece. All right, so the way I'm going to stitch the seam along the side edges of the back is I'm going to use the grid on my mat. And remember, I have to do 3/4 inch, so I can't follow right along the inch. So I'm just going to eyeball actually a 1/4 inch away. And I'm just going to weave through just a little bit at a time to mark my 3/4 inch like this. And I'm just going to keep adjusting my lace so it's square with the grid right where I'm stitching. You know, you don't have to take tiny stitches, you know, just you want to keep them straight. So see how I'm building that seam line? And if some of the little pearls fall off right on the edge, it's okay because I'm going to smash the rest of them in a minute anyway. You have to get rid of the beads within the seam allowance. When I go to sew these together, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them right sides together and I'm going to line up my stitching lines like that. So even though my seam allowances aren't even, that'll work out okay. So the next step, once you have these marked, is you want to break all of the beads, the little pearls and seed beads within the seam allowance. Because we're going to trim those really short after. And I just have this very delicate little hammer. And basically I'm just going to pound them. If you don't wear glasses, I'd wear safety glasses because some of the beads may ping around and hit you in the face. So make sure you're using safety glasses or you're wearing your glasses. You know, so I'm getting all of the beads that are right in the seam allowance. You know, and because I marked it with thread, I can easily see how far I need to smash the beads without guessing. All right, so I've got that one. And you can just, you know, gently pick at them to get rid of the little fragments. Okay, so I'm going to be cleaning up particles of beads, I think, for a long time. Okay, so basically I'm going to put these together and I'm going to sew the seam. And I'm using a gold thread that matches the embroidery so the seam is not noticeable. And the tips for using a metallic thread is that you want to have a metallic needle, a Metallica needle. If it's possible on your machine, you want to have the spool in the upright position. And if you have Sewer's Aid, which is a liquid, like a silicone liquid, you put a few beads of it on the spool itself, and that will help it go through the machine in the eye of the needle without fraying. So those are the tips for using metallic thread. So, you know, upright spool position, Sewer's Aid, and Metallica needle. Also, I'm going to use my zipper foot on my machine because that way, if I didn't break a bead that's just inside the seam, I can stitch really close to it without it being in the way. So if you use your zipper foot, that will help you have to break less beads that are close to the seam inside the garment. I sewed the center front to the side front already, and you can see that after I sewed it, I just trimmed the seam very narrow. Okay, you can see that that's barely noticeable. Okay, so here's my silk bodice that's going to be under the lace, and if I just line it up with the seam right along here, that's going to lay really nicely, and the seams match. All right, and then after I get the other side front on and the back pieces, I'm then going to play with the other, the medallions that I trimmed away separately. So for example, I'm going to use this teardrop shaped lace medallion, and I'm going to put one in the center front like this. And then I may use these ovals or these little shapes to take up space maybe along the seam. And then I'll put another oval here. And then once I get all the lace on, the last oval will probably be here on either side. And I won't sew it too, like I'll make sure that I'm able to keep this free down here. So if it's not quite long enough, it'll just hang down that little bit onto the skirt. You know, it'll probably just make it, but if it doesn't, I'm not going to chop it off in the seam. I'm going to keep it free and then let it come down after. But that's going to be the overall design, you know, for the dress. So after I get all of this lace sewn together, that's my plan for designing this. All right, so I'm just gonna match up my purple thread that I hand stitched. So I'm aligning them up, and I'm gonna align them at the top, and I'm gonna align them at the bottom. And I'm basically just stacking those stitched lines. And when I get to the area where the side front needs to ease into the center front, I'm just going to pick the middle, and I'm going to split the ease in half, essentially. Line up my lines, and then I'm just going to pin it so it's flat. And because I'm working with netting, it just goes in very easily. See, I'm just lining this right up. And I'll just put some pins in there. Like that. See how I'm just lining it right up? And as I stitch it, you'll see how it's lined up too. And remember, I put my zipper foot on so I don't have to worry about the beads that are inside the garment. And I'm going to use a piece of this wash away mesh stabilizer. It's very, very easy for it to rinse away with hot water, and you can find it in the embroidery section of a sewing supply store. And basically I'm just going to stick it underneath my seam. And it does two things actually. The reason why I like to use this is it's white, so it helps me see what I'm stitching, and it rinses away really easily. So I'm going to use that wash away mesh, and basically I'm going to just start stitching, and I've got my metallic thread all ready to go with my metallic needle. And as I come to my pins, I'm going to take them out. All right, so you can see how everything's nice and lined up. I'm just stitching right along my purple thread. All right, so I'm sewing just outside the purple stitching, which means I'm giving the lace like 1/8 of an inch breathing room, so it doesn't have to stretch super tight across the silk. And that way I'm also not stitching on the purple stitching, which is nice because it'll pull out really easily. If I stitch on top of it, it'll get stuck, and I'll have to like fiddle with it to get the purple thread out. Okay, and I'm getting to the curve of the bust, and you can see that it lays really nicely because the mesh really eases in. All right, so this is how it looks now that it's sewn. I'm just going to open it up and check. Okay, so see, I like the way that's looking. So once I'm happy with the way it looks, I can just pull out these heavy purple threads, because I was careful not to catch them. Okay, so now those are out. And then the next thing is I'm going to go in and I'm going to trim the stabilizer so it's a little bit narrower, and then I'm just going to go and rinse it off with hot water, and this will come off very easily. And then after I rinse off the stabilizer with hot water, then I'm just going to trim my seam allowance, and it'll look like this one that I've already finished. So that's how I'm sewing the lace together. After I get this whole overlay together, then I'm going to start working on putting the lace applique or the medallions of lace on top of the overlay. All right, so I'll share those steps with you in the next episode, where I'm going to show you how to put the lace applique right on to the overlay like this and create a design. Okay, also, I just want you guys to know that I'm putting preview pictures and sort of sneak peeks of things before I shoot video, because a lot of the time I have to work on things before I shoot the video to make sure that's how I'm going to do it, or just test things out. So I take pictures and I'm posting them on my Instagram. So it's J Stern Designs on Instagram. So if you want to see what I'm doing before videos come out, or check and see what I'm doing, if you can't wait for the video, definitely check out my Instagram. Okay, so if you have questions about sewing this lace or breaking the beads or any of these things, or stabilizer, post them below, or visit my blog at J Stern Designs, and join me next time when we finish this lace overlay, and with the design of these lace motifs that I've cut out from the netting. So hope you guys have a great day. I hope you're enjoying this prom gown sew along. I'll see you next time.